After studying this module, you shall be able to know the different aspects of identity, learn about the various identity statuses, identify the two major viewpoints on personal identity, evaluate the relevance and appropriateness of personal identity theories, analyze the influences on identity development.
Animals are divided by nature into kinds or species, the individuals of each kind having uniformly the same external figure and the internal disposition, but differing in both from the individuals of other kinds. Hence, identity of kind in contradistinction to every other kind. Subsequently, though the physical part of an animal is continually changing by perspiration and adaptation, yet it continues the same animal from birth to death, the same with respect to its life, its faculties, its temper and disposition. Thus, identity is predicted of an animal in contradistinction to every other animal. However, it should be remembered that not only humans but all animals have an identity of their own, and not only animals but plants as well as other inanimate things also have their identities. Identity is also attributed to works of art, changes in the component parts notwithstanding. A ship may have been repaired at different times till not a single original rope or plank is left. It is, however, held to be the same ship, not from its component parts, but from the same idea being applied to it in all its changes. The identity of a river cannot depend on the water which is continually flowing, nor on the bed which frequently changes, but on the same idea being invariably attributed to it in all its changes. The name of a ship, of a river, or of any work of art tends to keep the mind steady in its idea of their identity. The identity of an animal or of a plant is the work of nature, independent of our ideas. The identity of a work of art through its different changes depends entirely on our ideas. Everyone knows that there are different species of animals and plants and can readily apply identity to one species in contradistinction to others. It is still more obvious to apply identity to an individual in contradistinction to any other individual or whatever species. The means by which that knowledge is obtained require to be explained, for they are not obvious. There is no difficulty with respect to works of art, the identity of which depends on our own ideas. But the identity of the works of nature is dependent of our ideas and is not obvious to any of our external senses. To explain our knowledge of that identity, we begin with the knowledge that every man or woman has of his or her own identity as the simplest case. The consciousness that every man has of himself and of his own existence qualifies all his actions. I am eating, I am walking, I am speaking. This is so natural that even children distinguish themselves from others. Now, if self qualify every present thought and action, it must also qualify every idea of memory, because that faculty recalls to the mind things as they happened. It is thus that I am made acquainted with my personal identity, that is, with being the person who saw the things mentioned above and every other thing recorded in my memory as said, done, or suffered by me. The same person, without regard to what changes my body may have undergone. The ideas of self and identity are closely related but are different constructs. The identity provides a sense of coherence and continuity, that is, while we may play different roles at times, we are indeed the same person. Thus, we are more than just the sum of our social roles. Gaining identity today is much harder than previously due to the major changes in society, laws, and traditional ideas. So, what is personal identity? Let's define it. Identity is people's concepts of who they are, of what sort of people they are, and how they relate to others. Identities are relatively stable, role specific understandings and expectations about self. My identity is defined by the commitments and identifications which provide the frame or horizon within which I can try to determine from case to case what is good or valuable, or what ought to be done, or what I endorse to oppose. Defining our own personal identity can take a lifetime, and to complicate matters, our identity changes throughout that period, whether or not we consciously undertake a process of personal development. So, what do we mean by personal identity? How can we answer the question, who am I? Personal identity is the distinct personality of an individual and is concerned with the persisting entity particular to a given individual. The personal identity structure appears to preserve itself from the previous version in time when it is modified. It is the individual characteristics arising from personality by which a person is recognized or known. Imagine waking up early morning without the knowledge of who you are. Life becomes a constant struggle, and to save one from such a struggle, we need personal identity. However, people suffering from amnesia do lead such a life. Identity from groups and community. We know our nationality, or at least most of us do. Although some people who have migrated or have dual citizenship may even find this difficult to be certain of. In this world, there is a wonderful opportunity for migration and travel, with the results that we can cease to feel part of our local community or even our nationality and instead feel part of the global village. Identity, even on this seemingly simple level, quickly gets complicated as previously strong local identities get transformed. On a yet more local level, we may view ourselves as a member of a local community, a housing estate, a school, an office, a company, or a town. For example, a person may be from a particular region of the country, say a particular tribe in Rajasthan. This belongingness would be a defining feature of the person's personal identity, as it shall be deeply influenced by the cultural underpinnings of the community. Each time we say we belong to one of those groups, we identify with them and adopt some of the behaviors and beliefs of the wider group. Some of these groups that we are part of are in conflict with each other. So, even on the level of these most basic external circumstances, it can be difficult to come up with a definitive identity of who we are. Identity through roles. In our day-to-day lives, we may define ourselves through the roles that we play. These roles may include being a mother or father, husband or wife, brother or sister, son or daughter, colleague, friend, enemy, teacher, etc. Again, some of these roles may be intention. Consider a priest or doctor serving in the front line alongside soldiers. A certain level of internal processing needs to take place for someone who is committed to saving and preserving life to also be involved in taking life. Identity through our work or profession. We may define ourselves through our profession or our work. I am a teacher, I am an accountant, I am a lawyer, I am a plumber, I am a chef, and so on, it goes on. However, if we define ourselves by what we do, our profession or work, then does this not oversimplify our complexity? Of course it does. There are many individuals who become lawyers, but they are not all the same. However, they may describe themselves as a lawyer, and this may be the main way in which they establish their own identity. But something is lost by doing this. Before we move to the consideration of the terms often confused with personal identity, it should be noted here that all the above mentioned sources of identity, that is community, roles, work, etc., are complementary to each other and not competing. Also, it depends a lot on the person, him or herself, whether to define themselves through these or not. Just like no two humans have identical fingerprints, similarly no two individuals define themselves in exactly the same way. However, overlaps may be there. Other related terms like self-understanding, it's the individual's cognitive representation of the self, the substance and content of different self-conceptions. It's a lifelong process in which some are more engaged and active and others are less engaged and passive. Self-recognition, it's the ability to recognize one's own image. It's assessed in infants via a mirror self-recognition task. To illustrate, in one study, Amsterdam instructed mothers to surreptitiously apply rouge to their infants' noses and then turn their infants to face a mirror. Marked directed behavior Locating the rouge on one's nose using the mirror image appeared to emerge around 24 months, arguably reflecting the development of an objective sense of self. Self concept, the content of the self, the known part of the self, the knowledge of who we are, me, develops. Research suggests that human infants develop self concept by age 2. It becomes more differentiated and complex with age. 8-year-old, I'm a boy. I have brown hair. I have green eyes. I have a really tall daddy. 12th grader, I am a human being. I am a moody person, often indecisive. I am curious. I am ambitious. I am an American or I am an Indian and a loner. Now, theories of personal identity. Erik Erikson's theory of psychosocial development. The theory explains how variation in identity status occur throughout development. Before examining the individual statuses, Erikson's theory needs to be reviewed, and the big aspects of his 8 stages that he has given are: if basic needs are met, infant develops sense of trust. If toddler acquires age appropriate independence, he'll develop some sense of autonomy. If child learns to initiate tasks, he'll develop sense of initiative. If child feels competent about his behavior, he'll develop sense of competence. If adolescent engages in self-exploration and role testing easily, she'll develop sense of identity. If young adult seeks to form close relationships and friendships easily, he'll develop sense of intimacy. If adult strives to make contributions to her world, she'll develop a sense of generativity. If aged adult can reflect on life and have feeling of accomplishment and satisfaction, he'll develop a sense of integrity. The adolescent's identity crisis. Identity formation is a lifelong task. Adolescents are experiencing lots of changes, and thus frustration can set in when trying to resolve the issue of roles and acquiring different selves. Some frustration is normal and referred to as identity crisis. Crisis comes from Greek word krisis, meaning turning point. It is a transition. Erikson thought the identity was discovered through an active process of trial and error, which created lots of anxiety. Some people never resolved their adolescent identity crisis. Identity consolidation is how one organizes and solidifies one's identity. Throughout development, this consolidation process is different at different stages. In early adolescence, that is puberty to mid-teens, is the period of destructuring. Middle adolescence, that is mid to late teens, is a period of restructuring. Late adolescence, late teens to 20s is a period of consolidation and testing of initial identities. The 4 statuses of identity. There is a 4-fold concept model that describes how individuals progress in their identity consolidation along a continuum from identity diffusion to identity achievement. This model is called the 4 statuses of identity by Marcia. The 4 statuses are a combination of our level of, firstly, crisis, period of identity development when individual is choosing among meaningful alternatives, that is exploration. Second is commitment, part of identity development when individual shows personal investment in what they are doing. Identity achievement, both exploration and commitment to personal involvement and decision making have chosen a career goal and stick to their values, are flexible and can change life goals based on their experiences, can appraise parents realistically, accepting some things and rejecting others. They choose friends and partners who help them become less dependent on parents. Identity moratorium. Exploration is present but commitment to personal involvement and decision making is not. A delayed exploration of identity, few firm commitments to career, high levels of anxiety, less certain of values than achievers, may experience rebellion or be critical of establishment, have guilt, disappointing parents. Identity foreclosure. Exploration is absent, yet commitment to personal involvement and decision making is present. Have avoided most exploration of any kind due to premature choices endorsed by parents, on surface appears as achievers but inside highly anxious, depressed or defeated. Avoid experimentation and conflict, just believe whatever parents said, have big respect for authority and often pick partners and friends on whom they can also be dependent like parents. Identity confusion, it's called diffusion. Both exploration and commitment to personal involvement and decision making are absent, have altogether avoided this identity crisis, also exhibit high levels of anxiety, rigid stereotypical behavior, they put off making life choices, lose selves in an endless absorption social life sex and drugs, loners and drifters from one job to the next, usually end up hospitalized or in therapy. Locke's psychological theory of personal identity, according to this, a person is a thinking, intelligent being that has reason and reflection and can consider itself as itself, the same thinking thing in different times and places, which it does only by that consciousness which is inseparable from thinking and as it seems to me essential to it. This view about what persons are leads to a view of personal identity, that is a view about what it is for something to remain the same person over time. For since consciousness always accompanies thinking and it is that makes everyone to be what he calls self and thereby distinguishes himself from all other things, in this alone consists personal identity, that is the sameness of a rational being, and as far as this consciousness can be extended backwards to any past action or thought, so far reaches the identity of that person. The view then seems to be this: a person X existing at t and a person Y existing at some later time t star are the same person if and only if they share the same consciousness. But what, you might ask, does it mean for X and Y to share the same consciousness? Locke's answer seems to be contained in the following claim: for as far as any intelligent being can repeat the idea of any past action with the same consciousness it had of it at first, and with the same consciousness it has of any present action, so far it is the same personal self. This explains why Locke's theory is sometimes called the memory theory of personal identity. For X and Y to be the same person is for them to share the same consciousness, and for them to share the same consciousness is for Y to be able to remember or repeat the idea of elements of the consciousness of X. Influences of identity development. As mentioned earlier, identity formation, which begins during adolescence, is a lifelong dynamic process in which a change is either the individual or the context opens up the possibility of reformulating identity. A wide variety of factors influence identity development. Personality. Identity status is both cause and consequence of personality characteristics. This dual relationship is evident from the discussion of Erikson's theory of psychosocial development in the preceding section. Adolescents who assume that absolute truth is always attainable tend to be foreclosed, as they tend to be rigid in their views and fail to explore the differences, whereas those who doubt they'll ever feel certain about anything are more often identity diffused. Young people who appreciate that they can use rational criteria to choose among alternatives are more likely to be in a state of moratorium or identity achievement. This flexible, open-minded approach helps them greatly in pursuing educational, vocational and other life goals. Family. Teenagers' identity development is enhanced when their families serve as a secure base from which they can confidently move on to their wider world. In families of diverse ethnicities, adolescents who feel attached to their parents and say they provide effective guidance, but who also feel free to voice their own opinions, tend to be in a state of moratorium or identity achievement. Bowlby's concepts of secure attachment and insecure attachment can be used to explain how family environment influences identity development. Peers. Interaction with diverse peers through school and community activities encourages adolescents to explore values and role possibilities. And close friends like parents can act as a secure base, providing emotional support, assistance, and models of identity development. It should be noted here that unlike affiliations like family and religion, which are given to a person by birth, friends and peers are on a larger level chosen by the person himself. Hence, it is inevitable that the kind of peers or friends one chooses would invariably influence his identity. School, community, and culture. Schools and communities can jointly foster identity development. Supportive experiences include classrooms that promote high level thinking, teachers and counselors who encourage low SES and ethnic minority students to go to college, extracurricular activities that offer teenagers responsible roles consistent with their interests and talents, vocational training that immerses adolescents in the real world of adult work. Culture strongly influences an aspect of mature identity not captured by the identity status approach, constructing a sense of self continuity despite major personal changes. The summary. Identity is people's concepts of who they are, of what sort of people they are, and how they relate to others. Personal identity provides the answer to the question, who am I? Our affiliation to a particular group, community, and the roles assigned to us, our work and our profession all help define our personal identity. Erikson recognized formation of an identity, a solid self-definition based on self-chosen values and goals, as the major personality achievement of adolescence. In complex societies, identity achievement and identity moratorium are psychologically healthy identity statuses. Long-term identity foreclosure and identity diffusion are related to adjustment difficulties. Locke provided a psychological theory of personal identity which has philosophical roots. Adolescents who take a flexible, open-minded approach to grappling with competing beliefs and values and who feel attached to parents but free to voice their opinions are likely to be advanced in identity development. Close friends provide support as younger people explore options. So, schools and communities that offer varied options for exploration also foster identity.
Personal identity is the distinct personality of an individual and is concerned with the persisting entity particular to a given individual. Identity is people's concepts of who they are, of what sort of people they are, and how they relate to others. Identities are relatively stable, role-specific understandings and expectations about self. The three major determinants of personal identity are: 1. Identity from groups and community. We may view ourselves as a member of a local community, a housing estate, a school, an office, a company, or a town. 2. Identity through roles. In our day-to-day lives, we may define ourselves through the roles that we play. These roles may include being a mother or father, husband or wife, brother or sister, son or daughter, colleague, friend, or even enemy. 3. Identity through our work or profession. We may define ourselves through our profession or our work. I am a teacher, I am an accountant, I am a lawyer, I am a plumber, I am an electrician, I am a chef, etc. The other related terms that define personal identity are: self-understanding. It is the individual's cognitive representation of the self. Self-recognition. It is the ability to recognize one's own image. Self-concept. It is the content of the self or the known part of the self. Erik Erikson's theory of psychosocial development explains how variations in identity status occur throughout development. The basic aspects of his 8 stages are: if basic needs are met, infant develops sense of trust. If toddler acquires age-appropriate independence, will develop sense of autonomy. If child learns to initiate tasks, will develop sense of initiative. If child feels competent about his behavior, he will develop sense of competence. If adolescent engages in self-exploration and role testing easily, she will develop sense of identity. If young adult seeks to form close relationships and friendships easily, he will develop sense of intimacy. If adult strives to make contributions to her world, she will develop a sense of generativity. If aged adult can reflect on life and have feeling of accomplishment and satisfaction, he will develop a sense of integrity. Identity formation is a lifelong task. Adolescents experience a lot of changes, and thus frustration can set in when trying to resolve the issue of roles and acquiring different selves. Some frustration is normal and referred to as an identity crisis. Erikson thought the identity was discovered through an active process of trial and error, which created lots of anxiety. Some people never resolved their adolescent identity crisis. Identity consolidation is how one organizes and solidifies his or her identity. Throughout development, this consolidation process is different at different stages. 1. Early adolescence. Puberty to mid-teens. It is a period of destructuring. 2. Middle adolescence. Mid to late teens. It is a period of restructuring. 3. Late adolescence. Late teens to early 20s. It is a period of consolidation and testing of initial identities. There is a fourfold concept model that describes how individuals progress in their identity consolidation along a continuum from identity diffusion to identity achievement. This model is called the Four Statuses of Identity by Marcia, 1980. 1. Identity achievement. It involves both exploration and commitment to personal involvement and decision making. 2. Identity moratorium. In it, exploration is present, but commitment to personal involvement and decision making is not. 3. Identity foreclosure. In it, exploration is absent, yet commitment to personal involvement and decision making is present. 4. Identity confusion. It involves both exploration and commitment to personal involvement and decision making is absent. Locke distinguishes between the identity of atoms, masses of atoms, and living things. Locke goes on to suggest that one's personal identity extends only so far as one's consciousness. He offers the argument that because in order to be a self, one must be a thinking thing, and that because consciousness always accompanies thinking. The consciousness Locke refers to can be equated with memory. This assumption is supported by Locke's assertion that as far as a consciousness can be extended backwards to any past action or thought, so far reaches the identity of that person. It is the same self now as it was then, and it is by the same self with this present one that now reflects on it, that action was done. An abridged version of Locke's memory theory of personal identity would therefore conclude that memory is both a necessary and sufficient condition of self and, therein, personal identity. A wide variety of factors influence identity development. Burke, 2009. Personality. Identity status is both cause and consequence of personality characteristics. Family. Teenagers' identity development is enhanced when their families serve as a secure base from which they can confidently move out into the wider world. Peers. Interaction with diverse peers through school and community activities encourages adolescents to explore values and role possibilities. School, community, and culture. School and communities can jointly foster identity development. Supportive experiences include classrooms that promote high-level thinking. Let us summarize what we have learned. Identity is people's concepts of who they are, of what sort of people they are, and how they relate to others. Our affiliation to a particular group, community, and the roles assigned to us, our work and/or profession all help define our personal identity. Erikson recognized formation of an identity, a solid self-definition based on self-chosen values and goals, as the major personality achievement of adolescence. Long-term identity foreclosure and identity diffusion are related to adjustment difficulties. Locke provided a psychological theory of personal identity which has philosophical roots.